Hey guys, so for my video project, I decided to do the effects of alcohol on eyewitness identification, confidence and decision times. However, due to time constraints, we're just really going to look at eyewitness identification and a little bit on confidence. So the general overview of this article is basically about how alcohol affects eyewitness identification. And I find this quite relevant at the time, as it is known that a lot of people do make statements and identifications to the police and law enforcement after they've had a few drinks. So it is sort of important to figure out whether these are actually reliable or not. Now, when looking at this article, there was probably about 10 different hypotheses, but for the purpose of this video, we're just going to look at the three main ones. The first, which is alcohol myopia theory. This theory is about the notion that alcohol makes you be able to sort of focus quite well on one thing, but nothing really apart from that. So the background you completely sort of block out. Also, the second one is the disinhibition account, which is about how accurate you are when making an identification. And thirdly, the optimality hypothesis, which is about how confident you are in your decision making about identifications and statements, etc. So to look at these things, there's two studies. The first, in study one, involves two Confederates, where one Confederate will approach someone in a bar. They'll speak to them for about 90 seconds about clubbing, and then they'll receive a phone call about an emergency in which involves an ambulance, and they'll make sure that they're in earshot of the participant before ducking off, so the participant has an increased level of arousal, which is sort of aiming at that alcohol myopia theory. Then the Confederate 2 will then approach and tell the participant that they've just been part of the study, ask for some written consent, and then take their blood alcohol concentration. Then they'll ask if they remember seeing Confederate 1 in a lineup of 6 different people. Study 2 is fairly similar to study 1, except there's 3 Confederates involved and there's 2 targets. So this time, after the conversation, the targets leave, the Confederate will then present them with a lineup where only one of the targets is actually present in the lineup, and they've got to decipher which one it is. Now, when looking at the results, the first study didn't really give much conclusive evidence, which we'll touch on later on. But these are the results from study 2, and you can see that there's a table here that shows that there is a correlation between lower levels of BAC and more correct identifications, and then higher levels of false identifications with a higher level of BAC. So you can see that what's interesting is, although they are less accurate, they're also more confident when they're drunker, which can be problematic when making an identification and a statement with the police. So obviously, this being a fairly new and fresh area of study and field, one of the big problems is there's not a whole lot of evidence and other experiments to compare it to. But within the bounds of this study, the biggest problems arose from the fact that all participants were Caucasian, which does not give a fair representation of the population. All the Confederates were female. There was an uneven level of intoxication, which you can see in this graph, which combines the levels of intoxication and the number of participants between study 1 and study 2 combined. And this is also where you sort of get those inaccuracies in study 1, as study 1, the level of BAC sort of cuts off here. So no one really exceeds 0.15. So then there's no one that is extremely intoxicated in the study, or like considerably drunk. So a lot of the results are fairly central and fairly similar, as no one in the first study is overly drunk. So people are all operating on a fairly similar basis. But then again, to sort of get these more accurate results, it is becoming an ethical issue, as to get people beyond that 0.15% blood alcohol concentration, they are going to get quite drunk. And so that is an ethical issue, because, it's not necessarily healthy to be that intoxicated. Now, when you look at the real world implications of this study, I suppose one useful thing is that people with high BACs probably shouldn't have their statement carry heaps of weight unless it's supported by other evidence when they're making eyewitness identifications. And secondarily, all those are slightly contrary to the first. You can be fairly confident in the majority of cases where statements are being made whilst alcohol has been involved, as unless they are really quite drunk, they are still going to be fairly accurate. And in fact, according to this study, people with a BAC of 0.07 were the highest bracket of accuracy. So in fact, when you had a little bit of alcohol in your system, you were more likely to be accurate according to this study. Now, when it comes to real-world implications, like looking at me personally and like sort of what I took from what I learnt, I guess I am the sort of bloke that doesn't mind having a few beers and going downtown and having a good time. So in that setting, it is likely that at some stage in my life I'm going to come across some altercation or witness something where I will have to make a statement to police, and sort of knowing my limits of usefulness and sort of how to handle the situation in accordance with, sort of how drunk I am. Hopefully I'll be able to sort of look back at this study and go, well, even if I am fairly confident, if I am quite hammered, I guess I should probably, be wary that my statements may not be fully accurate. But on the contrary, I should still be fairly confident that unless I am written off, I am going to be useful and be able to contribute to the police in their investigation when they are questioning me. So I should be as helpful as possible. So yeah, that's basically my presentation. It is still a fairly new area of study, and there is a lot of ways to go in terms of sort of narrowing this down and making it more accurate. But I did find it useful and quite interesting, and it is quite relevant, especially to us young people moving forward in life and, going downtown, experiencing alcohol-fueled environments.